It's time we got a business update this morning. We've got some important stories that we've been also following in world news. Matthew Warren is on set with us to explain. There's been a lot of late night talks, and finally European leaders, or finance ministers as it were, reached a deal on banking regulations.
Yes, that's right, too. A very late night, 14 hours of talks, in fact, to get there. But get there they did. And this is all part of the plan for the European Central Bank to take charge of supervising banks in the Eurozone. Well, that agreement was reached despite some serious sticking points.
The fate of the Eurozone in the hands of one supervisory body. After months of negotiations, Eurozone finance ministers have reached an agreement on banking regulation that should keep the financial services in line and avoid a repeat of recent banking crises. EU Commissioner Michel Barnier outlined the ambitions of the umbrella organisation.
It is about supervising together, taking measures on a European scale, knowing we are dealing with thousands of banks, many of which are cross-border banks, and many of which, when they aren't doing well at home, have negative consequences on other countries in Europe.
The ECB will be at the centre of the project, supervising banks with more than 30 billion euros in assets. They'll be able to shut down institutions that don't follow the rules. Banks within the 17 Eurozone states will be affected, although non-Eurozone countries can opt into the Union too. Sweden and the UK had been reluctant to endorse certain regulatory measures. London, for example, is keen to safeguard the city's powers when it comes to currency transactions. In the end, Sweden's finance minister said they'd agreed to disagree when it comes to the initiative.
I think we found a good compromise. These have been very tough negotiations. Sweden will remain outside the banking union, but we believe that this is a good compromise.
The deal still has to be corroborated by EU leaders. Political validation that will be high on the agenda at Thursday and Friday's summit in Brussels.
Matthew, European leaders are meeting later today in Brussels, and they're going to be discussing this. What are they essentially just going to rubber stamp the deal that was made this overnight?
Of course, you can never be sure, but the expectation is that having sent all their finance ministers in to do this deal, they are going to greenlight at least to go to the next stage, which is that it needs to now go to the European Parliament for more discussions. There's plenty more work to do on this. This isn't happening, on Monday morning. But this is the last summit of the year. One of the other things those European leaders will be doing when they meet is expected to give the green light to a payment of around 44 billion euros to Greece. That follows successful completion of this debt buyback that Athens was running earlier this week.
Now, Matthew, how are European markets responding? I presume there's been some kind of reaction on the markets to this banking union agreement.
Well, markets are pretty flat at the open this morning. There you can see what's going on. Now, they haven't shot up, and part of the reason for that is that they often expect this to happen, and also they want to see what impact this is really going to have on growth and all of those sorts of issues as well. So as we can see, it's only the Milan market that's doing well. Of course, a lot of instability sending markets up and down this week in Milan. Asian markets have been closing now, and again, it's a mixed picture there. This Thursday, and only the Nikkei doing particularly well there. The Kospi as well, not bad, up 1.4%.
Matthew, this morning you're also looking at a bold policy announcement by America's central bank.
Yes, that's right, and that explains partly what was going on there in the Nikkei. This is from the Federal Reserve saying that it's going to keep interest rates low until unemployment in the US is at 6.5%. Now, it's the first time that the Fed has tied interest rates directly to unemployment. Unemployment in the US, after shooting up after the financial crisis, has now fallen down to around 7.7%, so still a way to go until it gets to 6.5%. Let's take a listen to the Fed chairman, Ben Bernanke.
There was a lot of agreement that having a more explicit connection between rate policy and the state of the economy was more transparent and more helpful to the markets and to the public than our date-based guidance. So we do hope that it'll be more helpful and give markets more information about how we're going to respond going forward.
Turning to Italy now, markets are still nervous about political instability there.
Yes, as we just saw in the markets, they're up pretty much this morning. They were falling earlier in the week. They've been nervous about the fact that Mario Monti's resigning early. What's going to happen there? Well, Mario Monti, as Prime Minister, is seen as having brought some stability to the country's economy, and one of his priorities has been clamping down on tax evasion.
Guardia di Finanza, buonasera. the nerve centre for Rome's tax police. Here, officers take calls round the clock on a dedicated hotline from people reporting tax evasion or any activity deemed to be fiddling the system. And the number of calls is on the up.
We've gone from 6,500 calls in 2010 to 7,400 in 2011, then to 8,200 in the first 10 months of 2012. So there's been a huge growth, especially since autumn last year.
A date that coincided with Italy's Prime Minister Mario Monti coming to power. Although soon to step down from the job, for Monti, stamping down on tax evasion has been key to trying to restore the faith of the money markets in the Italian economy and cutting the nation's vast debts.
Italy has a very high rate of tax evasion, and this has been going on for a long time. The figures aren't 100% certain because we're talking about evasion here, but it's estimated that it represents 20% of GDP, which is a considerable amount.
Last year, the state did manage to claw back over 12 billion euros, but there's still a long way to go.
The biggest fraudsters are those using offshore tax havens. On that note, it's necessary to work on an international level to close the loopholes that the havens provide. It's a very serious problem within international politics.
But it's at home where the authorities have had greater success. Raids earlier this year on bed and breakfast businesses showed that the books of as many as 30% were out of order.
And we've got possibly the most somber story of the day coming up. Matthew Warren has news of Mickey Mouse.
The things that I have to do in this job. We're obviously going to talk about Christmas now, and we're going to talk about Christmas toys. And I've got a co-presenter here in the studio that I would like to introduce you to for that, and I think he's got something to say himself.
Now, of course, this being France 24, this is the French-speaking Mickey Mouse.
This is Mickey Mouse, yeah, doing a bit of dancing for us.
It's Le Mickey Mouse.
Now, let me tell you why we are having fun with Mickey.
With breakdancing Mickey, by the way.
Breakdancing Mickey. He's a bit noisy when he does that. Now,
this actually does link to business.
We contacted some of the world's biggest toy manufacturers. Mattel makes this particular model. We wanted to find out what are the big toys in Europe. Now, Christmas spending will be down slightly by about 2% this year in Europe, but it's still very significant, and it's actually the Irish in the Eurozone that spend the most. Now, about half of this total spending goes on children's toys, and that would be about 340 euros here in France.
And what are the key trends in the toy market?
Well, the key trends are technology all the way, as you can see here. Technology in new toys, technology as well in older toys, for example, Monopoly, use of apps as well, tying in games with iPads, for example, so that there's more interactivity as well. So plenty to enjoy there this Christmas.
All right, red is your color. Matthew Warren with Business News. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. World News is back in just a few minutes. Bye-bye.